Although you might have heard of Indigenous people having a higher suicide rate, did you also know that they're massively overrepresented in foster care? Despite only 7.7% of Canadian children being Indigenous, they make up 53.8% of children in foster care, which is almost 7 times the expected amount. In case you didn't find these statistics startling enough, I expect you'd be stunned by the fact that in Manitoba, 90% of the children in foster care are Indigenous. Now, after hearing this, you must surely wonder how such a monumental problem could even have begun in the first place. Well, the answer to this is quite simply complicated. To fully understand this issue, we must go back in time. Back in the 1960s, during the unfortunate period of our history known as the 60s scoop. At the time, it was common for the child welfare system to take away Indigenous children so they could get adopted by a white family, who then proceed to cut off all the ties they had with their previous relatives, bury the Indian side of them, and send them to residential schools where they would frequently experience abuse and neglect. This practice prevailed for multiple decades, partially due to child welfare workers basing their assessments on stereotypes, and is now believed to have been the cause of significant intergenerational trauma. Furthermore, the trauma sustained during this stretch of time later manifested itself through inadequate nurturing, as a lot of Indigenous parents were struggling with issues such as mental health problems, substance abuse history, and lack of comprehension in regards to parenting, as they only had experience with instilling discipline through punishment. Additionally, in 2008, it was found that First Nations children were 6 times more likely to be part of neglect investigations, which was a clear indicator that even long after the 60s scoop, Indigenous people were still being targeted by the child welfare system, which fails to properly evaluate all the aspects which constitute neglect. In order to change this situation, we must change the broken tools like the Family Risk Assessment (FRA) we currently rely on to evaluate the risks of neglect in Indigenous communities. The FRA cannot properly evaluate the family environment of Indigenous people since it does not take into account the fundamental differences between non-Indigenous and Indigenous families, such as the importance of letting children develop their autonomy, which the FRA might wrongfully interpret as neglectful behavior. Moreover, we must devise, as a society, a new, more comprehensive and fair framework that will be able to properly ensure children's well-being, regardless of their ethnic group. Finally, it is still possible for us, puny teenagers, to help solve this issue. All we need to do is to inform ourselves on topics surrounding Indigenous communities and push politicians through protests and means as such to not only address these difficult topics, but also to take concrete steps in the right direction.